Another big leak of secret Chinese government documents.
China's crackdown on the Muslim Uyghur minority.
Human rights abuses in the Xinjiang region is where about 1 million Uyghur...
China says they're training facilities designed to eradicate extremism.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories that we're covering this week. Big news that Beijing didn't want out there. Somebody inside the Communist Party wants the outside world to know what is happening in Xinjiang. Conflict of interest, the corporate kind. Reporters at Bloomberg News cannot investigate their boss, who happens to be running for the White House. They're tracking journalists from inside their phones. Governments are buying an insidious piece of Israeli software to target activists and reporters they don't like. And is a deep fake version of Boris Johnson.
Huzzah! Alas, why should you believe me?
Any less credible than the real Boris Johnson? It is one of the biggest human rights stories on the planet, one that we've reported on before, just not in this kind of detail. It is about China, specifically the province of Xinjiang, and the estimated 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim ethnic minorities currently held in massive internment camps there. Previously, most of what the world knew about Xinjiang came through some satellite imagery, carefully controlled official tours of those camps, plus the accounts of some of those imprisoned there. Now, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the New York Times both say they have troves of classified documents to work with, reportedly leaked from within China's Communist Party. Both organizations say the documents prove the internment camps are not about re-educating extremists or fighting terrorism, as Beijing would have the world believe, but to indiscriminately imprison and brainwash Xinjiang's Muslim population. In response, China has borrowed a phrase or two from offshore, calling the leaks fabrications and fake news. But as new evidence emerges, Beijing's narrative is proving increasingly difficult to defend. Our starting point this week, those classified documents on the camps in Xinjiang.
It's exceedingly rare for classified Chinese government documents to come to light. The last time there was a leak of this kind was, to my knowledge, in 2001 with the leak of the Tiananmen papers.
This is an unprecedented revelation because the Chinese government, under the ruling Communist Party, have been one of the most secretive entities around the world.
These new documents blow the CCP's narrative out of the water. There's no more denying, no more hiding. It's basically game over for Beijing's propaganda in Xinjiang.
The leaks represent a quantum leap in our understanding of what is unfolding in Xinjiang, human rights violations on an historic scale. What the Chinese government has produced, what the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the New York Times have published, is basically a how-to manual. How to incarcerate as many as 1 million Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities. How to deprogram them of their Muslim culture. How to reprogram them, meld them into the larger population of Han Chinese. How to hide the story from the outside world, and when exposed, how to spin that story by calling the prison camps vocational training centers, where people can learn job skills and are supposedly free to leave.
The one thing that stood out for me in the leaked confidential document is that the very first section talks about anti-escape measures, police guards, locking doors, complete camera surveillance. Even though we kind of knew about this, I was very struck by the intensity at which this was described in the document. The other really notable insight talks about how confidential and sensitive the so-called vocational training work is. Meaning the Chinese government itself was really trying to shroud the whole campaign in a cloud of secrecy. It had a strategy of denial, and the classified document clearly confirms this strategy.
What also really struck me was the point system that's used in the camps. So inmates are graded according to their behavior and also according to their test scores. So they're required to study Chinese language, to study Chinese communist ideology and Chinese law, and then they have to take exams. Those exam scores are used to calculate points, and those points are used to determine rewards and punishments, such as when they're able to see their family and when they're able to be released.
What's most important about these documents is that they are evidence. You know, this shows a clear intent by the second most powerful government in the world to politically re-engineer people's thinking, what they should be taught, what they're not allowed to say, what they can't think anymore. You know, it's one thing to read patently dishonest propaganda that talks about religious freedom being guaranteed to everyone in Xinjiang. When you sit down and read a how-to manual by a government that's a permanent member of the UN Security Council, it's terrifying.
Not that you would see that in the reporting of the Chinese media. President Xi Jinping demands loyalty in the Communist Party he leads and the media outlets the state controls. They have helped Beijing sell its version of the Xinjiang story to domestic audiences through depictions that whitewash what goes on in the prison camps, stories of dance classes and vocational training.
为了丰富学员们的课余生活，职业技能教育培训中心还成立了阳光文工团。
When questioned by international news outlets on the leaks, Chinese officials need to get their story straight. Denials from some, like China's ambassador to the UK, have been categorical.
I'm telling you what the document, so-called document you're talking about is a pure fabrications.
But that was contradicted by a foreign ministry official in Beijing who admitted the documents do exist, but accused the New York Times of sensationalistic reporting. These leaks may have revealed more than what is happening in Xinjiang. The timing of the disclosures could reveal a thing or two about what is happening in Beijing. President Xi does not tolerate leaks, meaning that someone took a big risk in getting the documents out.
Xi Jinping took power to 2012, made himself a president for life, and under the guise of fighting corruption, he rounded up thousands of opponents. So within the government, within the party, within the society, Xi Jinping apparently made lots of enemies. So some of these people in the senior leadership is not only disgruntled, they're very worried about the direction that Xi Jinping taking the country to.
The New York Times leaks demonstrated to us that there was a huge purge of Communist Party officials who refused to carry out the campaign of mass detention with sufficient enthusiasm. So there has been resistance, and quite a bit of resistance. So these leaks reflect the fact that there are people who view the policies there with a degree of horror.
The Chinese strategy of keeping a close lid on what is happening there, I think really indicates how much they consider this to be an atrocity. Officials who violate party discipline or who leak any information are being severely punished. No person, no official under no circumstance must be allowed to leak anything at all on the whole re-education effort, be it the camps or be it anything related to it.
I mean, this is the government that spent a year denying that these camps existed at all, and then under international pressure changed its tune to suggest that they're only vocational training programs that everybody's perfectly happy to go off to. But I think, again, one of the net effects of the publication of these leaked documents is to show that even the Chinese government's own internal propaganda narrative does not hold up. People objected. Officials objected. People within their own system said this is the wrong thing to do.
The outside world has been seeing a different version of the same story, one that has come out in bits and pieces through satellite imagery, captured, uploaded, and interpreted from abroad, and occasional testimonies from Uyghurs who had been interned but have made it out. These new leaks don't just fill in the blank spots in the international reporting.
These highly classified internal government cables
and destroy Beijing's shifting narrative on Xinjiang. They have exposed how the Chinese authorities are using technology, predictive policing to control the region, a possible sneak preview of what other states will be doing soon.
We previously knew that there was an app that police had on their phones that would suggest names to them of people for them to investigate. But this is happening on a scale larger than we previously knew. For example, in a period of 1 week, the predictive policing platform suggested the names of 24,000 people as suspicious, and Chinese police detained 15,000 of them and put them into these detention camps, only on the basis of an algorithm. That's truly shocking, and it really matters because China is actively promoting itself as an alternative governance model from the West, and they are actively exporting some of this technology. So what's happening in Xinjiang is not staying in Xinjiang.
Which brings an even greater relevance to what is already a mega story. The consortium that broke it consists of 17 media organizations in 14 countries, none of them in China, since no news outlet would dare take part. The consortium would have known that going in, that the impact of its journalism would not be felt in Xinjiang or even Beijing, not unless it has an impact elsewhere first, in the long list of countries that do business with Xi Jinping's China.
Government officials around the world cannot say that they did not know. Now they know. We have evidence. And the documents that we have seen should be on the desk of politicians, legislators, and more importantly, prosecutors who go after war criminals around the world. Chinese government can continue to deny existence of not only the documents but also the camps. But the world leaders who call themselves guardian of democracy and human rights cannot do it anymore. This is the time to act.
We're discussing other media stories that are on our radar this week with one of our producers, Flo Phillips. Flo, in Egypt, a website widely regarded as one of the few, if not the very last, independent news outlet in the country, has now been targeted by the authorities there. What is the story at Madamasra?
Last Sunday, Richard, plain-clothed security forces raided its offices in Cairo, arresting 3 staff members, including the editor-in-chief, Lina Atalla. They were released after a few hours of questioning, but they said that their phones and laptops had been seized. Now, what triggered this raid was a story that Madamasra published about President Sisi's eldest son, Mahmoud al-Sisi. The article stated that he is, in effect, being sidelined by his father's inner circle. But perhaps just as important is the fact that Madamasra says it actually got the story from sources inside the Egyptian intelligence.
But this isn't the first time that Madamasra has pushed the limits. It's known for this kind of thorough investigative reporting that Egyptians need right now. So why now for this raid?
Well, first off, there is a huge taboo generally around reporting on President Sisi and his family. Now, Madamasra dared to cross that line. But there's also a sense of unease right now within Egypt's power structure. Back in September, we reported on anti-government protests. They were the first since Sisi took power in a coup in 2013. The Madamasra raid may have ended with the staff there being released, but since then, 3 other journalists have been picked up and, quote, charged with joining a terror group. So signs of trouble in Egypt that we'll need to keep an eye on.
Let's move to the U.S. now, the 2020 presidential elections. It's just what America needs, another billionaire running for the White House, the owner of Bloomberg News. So what is the coverage-related controversy surrounding Michael Bloomberg?
Well, I mean, it's all in the name, isn't it? Last week, shortly after Bloomberg announced he was taking a run at the Democratic nomination, the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg News, a guy called John Micklethwaite, put out a note to staff on the kind of coverage their owner can expect. It was pretty straightforward. He said, "We will continue our tradition of not investigating Mike." Now, Micklethwaite said that that ban on investigative reporting does also apply to the other Democratic candidates. Still, the journalists' union at Bloomberg called the policy alarming, saying it should be rescinded. One former editor of a Bloomberg business magazine, Megan Murphy, summed it up in a tweet. She said, "It is truly staggering that any editor would put their name on a memo that bars an army of unbelievably talented reporters and editors from covering massive, crucial aspects of one of the defining elections of our time." Staggering. Now, look, I'm sure this won't be the last that we're going to hear on this, although it might well be the last from Bloomberg News. Meanwhile, the editor, Micklethwaite, has got some big holes to fill. 2 of his senior editors have bolted, temporarily, they say, to work on Bloomberg's campaign.
OK, thanks, Flo. Now, here's an offer that many governments just cannot refuse. Would you like to hack into the phones of journalists, gather up every bit of data, and trace every call, message, and keystroke? Then you're in luck. There's some malware, malicious software for that. This story starts with an Israeli company called the NSO Group. It says it's in the business of cyber intelligence for global security and stability. The company's primary product is known as Pegasus. It's a program so sophisticated that it can embed into your mobile phone through just one phone call, even if you don't take that call. The governments that use Pegasus, from Saudi Arabia to Mexico to India, all say they're out to stop security threats. But it's also used against civil society, including human rights activists. And in October, WhatsApp sent the NSO Group a clear message. It's suing the company for developing Pegasus to specifically hack into people's devices through that messaging app. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on the growing surveillance threat against journalists and the malware of choice for the governments involved.
Imagine, it's late on a Sunday night, the end of your weekend, and you get this message.
Hi Shubhranshu. Apologies for this message from out of the blue. My name is
John Scott Railton. I am the senior researcher at the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto in Canada. The Citizen Lab works on tracking internet threats against civil society. I am lightly familiar with your work, and this message concerns a specific digital threat that we believe you face. I would like to set a quick time to chat. Again, I apologize for the strangeness of such a contact. Unfortunately, there is
no better way to do this kind of thing.
The message came to journalist Shubhranshu Chaudhary in early October. Chaudhary works in India's eastern region, the site of a long-running leftist insurgency, a movement the Indian government calls the country's single biggest internal security threat. In addition to reporting events there, he has set up grassroots media projects with communities caught in the midst of the fighting. His work has put him on the radars of both the Indian government and leftist guerrilla leaders. It's the kind of attention he's become used to.
I didn't take it very seriously. I thought it could be another spam. Then I contacted some of my friends who work on digital security. And they came back to me immediately that this is serious. You should get in touch with this gentleman. So I responded, and then we started talking.
Chaudhary didn't know it at the time, but the Toronto-based research group, the Citizen Lab, was contacting him as part of an investigation it was conducting on behalf of a big-name company, WhatsApp, the messaging app used by 1.5 billion people around the world. The focus of the investigation was a piece of malicious software produced by an Israeli firm, the NSO Group. In May, WhatsApp had discovered that its messaging app, specifically its video calling facility, was being used to infiltrate the phones of selected targets. The name of this piece of surveillance software? Pegasus, and it is dangerous.
So Pegasus is incredibly invasive technology that has been developed, I'd say, really within the last 10 years as a growing industry for law enforcement, intelligence agencies to get inside people's devices. If you get inside somebody's mobile device, you effectively see a window into everything having to do with their world, their movements, their social relationships, even their most private communications, even those that are end-to-end encrypted. You can turn on the microphone, the camera, capture sound, and of course track somebody because of the GPS. So this is extraordinarily powerful surveillance technology.
There's no such thing as perfect security. It's a constant cat and mouse. We've got the tech companies conducting mass surveillance on us and exploiting us and our data. We've got hackers who are selling dangerous cyber weapons to try and get access to people's stuff. And we've got governments who, for power and control, want to know everything about us.
The way this technology works, it's meant to be stealthy. Obviously, if you're going to ring alarm bells that you have a surveillance technology in your device, people will quickly expunge it. So the big evolution and sophistication of NSO's attack infrastructure was revealed in May of this year when it emerged that they had developed a capability to infect a device simply by ringing the phone. So they wouldn't have to trick somebody into doing anything, they just have to call the number.
As cyber warfare grows in importance and the weapons grow more sophisticated, national defense officials are equipping themselves, buying the best tools available. India, Mexico, Kenya, Qatar, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia are among the 30 countries that are reportedly NSO's clients. They say they use Pegasus against bad actors, extremists in India, drug lords in Mexico. If only it ended there. The spyware is also being used on human rights activists, community organizers, the lawyers working with them, and journalists. One of the features of Pegasus is that it allows client governments to craft bespoke text messages embedded with links that, when clicked upon, infect the recipient's device. Yahya Asiri is a Saudi rights campaigner and commentator based in London who also produces video bulletins on Saudi politics. Last year, he started noticing strange messages being sent his way.
I was getting a number of text messages on my phone. Most of them had links and were asking me to click on them. For example, one message said, "There's a protest in front of the Saudi embassy against the arrest of my friend. For more details, click this link." The final message I received said that a date had been set for me to be tried in court and that I needed to follow the link to get the rest of the details. That's how it began. Now, I had developed a process where I would transfer all of these messages to another computer and open them from there to be safe. When I clicked on the link about my supposed court date, I was taken through to the website of the Saudi Ministry of Justice. I couldn't even imagine that the official website of the Ministry of Justice would be used in a hacking attempt, so I opened it from my phone. I noticed straight away that my device was having issues.
Asiri says he contacted Amnesty International. The human rights NGO had recently found that one of its researchers had also been targeted with Pegasus. It later determined Asiri's phone had been compromised, infected by the malware. Amnesty then took Asiri's case to the Citizen Lab, which compared it with another case of a Saudi dissident based in Montreal who had also received some unexplained text messages. The Citizen Lab concluded both men were targets of Saudi authorities armed with Pegasus.
We use a combination of methods. Some of them are quite elaborate. They span a spectrum of techniques from computer science and engineering science to social science, other forms of research. So it's truly a mixed methods approach. Honestly, over the last 3 years, we've been doing research on NSO Group. They're selling to, countries with horrible track records of human rights abuses and a lack of government accountability. Like the Gulf countries, like Mexico, Rwanda. Targets are emerging who were tracked by death squads coming from Rwanda. It's like a rogues gallery of autocrats.
And NSO is an autocrat's dream. The company keeps developing and refining its techniques, from the carefully worded text messages with links that were sent to Yahya Asiri back in 2018, to the much more deceptive missed call via WhatsApp that was used against Shubhranshu Chaudhary. While NSO says it conducts rigorous ethics checks on its client states, the evidence is clear. Pegasus is being used against activists and journalists, significantly increasing the risks associated with doing their work.
There's absolutely things that people can do, especially journalists, to try and protect their communications and their sources. A lot of what protects journalists and others on a day-to-day basis is basic digital hygiene. Not making silly slip-ups, not clicking on unknown links, opening unknown emails, downloads, leaving passwords around and using two-factor authentication and so on. But none of us has the time or energy to try and act like spies. It's crazy that in this day and age, journalists are facing such enormous digital threats. We just have to do our best. But sometimes, as definitely in the case of the Pegasus attack, sometimes your best probably won't be enough.
Finally, deepfakes are coming. Video footage that has been digitally altered to put words into people's mouths, literally, to make it look like they're saying things they never have. Future Advocacy calls itself a nonpartisan think tank on global affairs and technology. It's out to educate people about the existence of deep fakes, the challenges they present to journalists and news consumers alike. With elections coming up in the UK, they've put out videos of the two main candidates, Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, appearing to endorse each other. We will leave you now with some scarily convincing clips from those videos and a simple question. Did I just say that? We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
Hi folks, I am here with a very special message.
We, the political class here in Westminster, have failed.
Division has coursed through our country as we argue with fantastic passion, vim and vigour about Brexit.
I'm urging all Labour members and supporters to consider people before privilege and back Boris Johnson to continue as our Prime Minister.
My friends, I wish to rise above this divide and endorse my worthy opponent, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, to be Prime Minister of our United Kingdom.
But you know what? Don't listen to me.
Huzzah! Alas, why should you believe me?
I think I may be one of the thousands of deep fakes on the internet, using powerful technologies to tell stories that aren't true.
And as you can see, even I, the Prime Minister, can be affected by them. Yes.
Yet no new laws are in place to govern them. Things have to change.
Yes, to help us rugby tackle deepfakes. Not children,